we talk about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu coming to not the White House, not invited by the White House, but represented by the opposition to the White House in Congress, the House Speaker, John Boehner. He's going to be addressing a joint session of Congress.
Well, I mean, this has been a drama for several years, the so-called Netanyahu-Obama clash. This is not the first time that Prime Minister Netanyahu has decided to snub U.S. President Obama. This is not the first time that the Republicans have invited him to speak in Congress against the wishes of the White House. But I think there's a little too much being made of this particular event, and a little too little at the same time. It's a little too much because I think there's been, over the course of the last several months, a return to a sort of a stable set of alliances that the United States has had for decades. In other words, lining up again with its major allies, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and now Saudi Arabia and American-backed Egypt. These pillars of stability have asserted themselves in the region. It's no secret that Mr. Obama has put a lot in terms of working with the Saudis in the region. So I think in that sense, too much is made of the clash with Netanyahu. There is a stability of U.S. and Israeli interests, and they're going forward together on the ground. There's too little made of this because, unfortunately, this kind of clash that Mr. Netanyahu is setting up is going to bring up the problem of solving the dispute with Iran. To my mind, there is no way forward in the Middle East unless there is some rapprochement with Iran, not only from the United States but also Saudi Arabia. And so Mr. Netanyahu's high-stakes game coming to the U.S. Congress is going to muddy the attempt to create some rapprochement for one of the major contradictions in West Asia.
And going to Israel's north, to Lebanon, can you talk about this violence that erupted last week? 2 Israeli soldiers, 1 Spanish peacekeeper were killed. And then days later, this revelation that the U.S. and Israel collaborated on a 2008 assassination of a senior Hezbollah figure in Damascus, in Syria.
Well, Aaron, you know, the problem in Syria has been grave. Over 200,000 people dead, much of Syria destroyed, no sign of a political solution, increased audacity by the Islamic State and by Jabhat al-Nusra and other al-Qaeda-backed groups inside Syria. In this context, over the past almost 2 years, Israel has repeatedly struck against Hezbollah targets inside Syria. You know, there was a strike late last year in Damascus airport of an apparent load of rockets that were coming in to resupply Hezbollah, perhaps from Iran. Just a few weeks ago, in the Quneitra area, up in the mountains in Syria, Israel struck a car, killing an Iranian general and a 20-year-old Hezbollah fighter by the name of Jihad Mughnieh. When this attack happened, Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah gave a speech saying, you know, Hezbollah is going to respond now, finally, after so many provocations. And so what Hezbollah did was they didn't attack across the blue line, which is the UN-mandated border between Israel and Lebanon, but they attacked in the Sheba farms, which is an area of Lebanon that Israel has occupied. In other words, it was a calculated attack inside the Sheba region. Israel responded across the blue line, killing a Spanish peacekeeper. But within hours of the retaliation from Israel, Hezbollah contacted the UN peacekeepers and said that they are done with their attack on Israel, and now the status quo can come back. In other words, there have been provocations, but in a sense, Hezbollah has been fairly disciplined in its retaliation. Nobody wants a war at this time between Hezbollah and Israel. it would complicate matters too greatly in the region. As it is, Jabhat al-Nusra is sitting at the borders of Lebanon, threatening to enter, threatening to create more chaos in that country. So nobody wants a war. Fortunately, this particular episode ended, with, well, not peace, but the calm that was there before. Of course, it wasn't a very good thing that right after that, what was revealed by the Washington Post and by Newsweek essentially validated what people in Hezbollah had known for a long time, which is that the father of the boy, the 20-year-old killed in Kenitra, Jihad Mughnieh, his father, Imad Mughnieh, a major military chief of Hezbollah, had been killed in a massive car bomb in 2008 in Damascus, a bomb that was positioned by the Americans. It was triggered by the Israelis. This is not the first major car bomb that the Americans have used against Hezbollah. That was perhaps in 1985 in the attempted assassination of Hezbollah's spiritual leader, Muhammad Fadlallah. That was in Beirut in 1985. Fadlallah survived that attack, but 80 civilians died. So there has been a pattern of provocation, and fortunately for now, this has not escalated into full-blown war.
But the issues that this raises, the U.S. using a car bombing in a country where it's not at war, in Syria 7 years ago. Can you talk about the legal issues here, and also do you see the potential for reprisals from Hezbollah?
Well, firstly, Aaron, as I said, this is not the first time that the United States has used a car bomb against Hezbollah when it has not been itself at war. In 1985, the bombing in Beirut was an enormous car bomb. It was placed by American intelligence and British intelligence. So there's been a pattern of utilizing this kind of assassination strategy against Hezbollah targets. Not only Hezbollah targets, by the way, but also inside Iran, against the nuclear people associated with the nuclear program. There were a series of assassinations 2 years ago, relatively unexplained. This has, of course, got major legal ramifications. The United States was not at war. The United States utilized Jordan, the Kingdom of Jordan, to have the car bomb driven through. It associated with Israel in this strike. Of course, there is a different standard for the goose and a different standard for the gander. There has been no real international, questioning of what has happened. There's been no real outrage. I'm not surprised that at the Security Council this question wasn't raised about using, this kind of violence. Meanwhile, in 2005, Mr. Hariri was killed inside Beirut, major politician, in Lebanon, and there's been a huge UN process of trying to uncover who killed Mr. Hariri. Here, CIA officials are directly saying that they conducted an assassination in Damascus, and there's been absolutely no condemnation of it.
Professor Prashad, we only have 2 minutes, and we wanted to deal with President Obama's trip to Saudi Arabia, the U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia, and Yemen and Libya. Start with Saudi Arabia very quickly and move on from there.
Well, the United States has begun to put a lot of eggs into the Saudi basket, hoping that Saudi Arabia is going to help stabilize the situation vis-a-vis the Islamic State, stabilize the situation in North Africa. I personally think this is a very myopic approach. I think the approach should be to create rapprochement between the different parties to the various conflicts, to bring Saudi Arabia and Iran together. But on the other hand, I think the Obama administration is, trying to play both sides against the middle, on the one side giving Saudi Arabia complete carte blanche, and on the other side, I suppose, keeping the talks with Iran going at a very mute level. Libya is a victim of this Arab Cold War, where the regional entities are utilizing Libya as a battleground for their own particular, forward policy, whether it's Saudi Arabia and Egypt on one side or Turkey and Qatar on the other. I mean, the West is largely absent from Libya, having used that as a laboratory to prove that it can conduct a military strike and create a good outcome. In fact, the opposite is demonstrated. The West is entirely absent. And as you know, the American embassy is no longer in Libya. The American embassy to Libya is based in Malta. And there's no emphasis from the West to try to once again bring parties together. It is a very dangerous situation, which is why the UN envoy has repeatedly said over the course of several months that we are near total chaos inside Libya. It's a real scandal, and I wish there was more reporting, more care about what's happening to a country that was destroyed by a war prosecuted by NATO.